So welcome to the first class of industrialized construction in the spring semester. My name is Daniel Hall, and I'm assistant professor of innovative and industrial construction. And I'm really excited that you are all here today and looking forward to kicking off a new semester where we talk about innovation, industrialization, entrepreneurship, and the future of the construction industry. So I hope you're also interested in these things, and we'll say a bit more as we go. Let me go ahead and get started here sharing. I'm going to assume you can see everything, but please just turn on a mic and let me know if for some reason it doesn't come through. And today, the goal is to talk about what is industrialized construction. And we're going to go through a lecture for the first 45 minutes where we try to answer that question. Then we have in the second hour a guest lecture, and finally we'll end up with a short overview of your first individual assignment. So lots to come. All right, so let's begin with this. About today's construction industry. Are these statements true? These are statements that I've heard in my time teaching and working in the construction industry. I've heard these statements over and over again. So these are some of the statements that I've heard. The first one is that all building projects are unique. I hear that a lot, right? Second, all project teams are unique. So we're going to put together a new team each time we have a new project to work on. The third, all projects are built with unique technical solutions and design. And we should ask ourselves, is this true? I hear these things a lot. So fourth, our industry builds prototypes every time. This is something that kind of comes out of the other three, but I hear people say, yeah, we build prototypes over and over again. And finally, the building process is so fragmented. There are so many different actors, or you could think of that as people, and so many different interfaces that kind of integrated solutions are just not possible. We're going to always remain how we are today. These are some statements that I hear a lot. And in this class, I want to challenge some of these statements. So we're going to see if these are really true, if they really do hold true as we think about industrialization of construction industry. And furthermore, you might be asking, before we talk about what is industrialized construction, we might need to ask ourselves, why should we industrialize construction? And here I have some pictures. They're not taken by me, they were taken by a colleague of mine in Sweden. And he was just walking around a construction site. So he was not going out looking for specifically these kind of photos or searching on Google for these images. He just took some photos. And this is the first one, and I think we should ask ourselves, and I would say these are typical of other construction sites I've seen around the world, including in Switzerland. Is this a picture of an effective supply chain? Do we really see that we're managing our construction sites well and our materials well? Here you can see some of the equipment used for scaffolding as they were kind of erecting the scaffolding. Have we created a high performing production facility, right? Are we really getting the best out of our production with this picture? Do we have conditions for high quality products? Here you can see there's the rain and you have some materials here sitting in the water, right? So those are probably going to be damaged or destroyed, right? So are we taking care of our high quality products with construction? Are we creating the healthy working conditions for our workers where people are empowered and doing their best in an environment, right? And obviously you can see here's the break station for the construction site on site. Are we engaging in sustainable construction in industry where 10 to 20%, depending on what research you look at, of brand new, what we say, virgin materials goes directly to the construction site, never makes its way to the building, but is then immediately discarded as waste, right? So is this really sustainable construction that we're talking about? And are we thinking about good coordination? Are our buildings highly coordinated? Or do we have problems like this where you have a door leading to nowhere, right? So have we really coordinated? This last one is one I found online, so it wasn't taken by my colleague. And finally, and most importantly, probably is do we have safety first, right? So when you think about how do you set up production facilities on the job site, what I find is that a lot of times companies make do and they do the best they can. Here you have a picture of a worker. He's using, if you can't tell, that's an electrical box. Okay, so his power is coming from that box, and he's also directing his saw directly towards the source of power, right? You might also argue his thumb is not in a good situation there as well. So, I don't want to make light of safety because we work in a very dangerous industry. But what I see is that sometimes our sites are not putting safety first. And what do the numbers say? Why should we industrialize construction? This is a figure that was made most popular from a report in McKinsey, but it had a long origin in construction research that looks at value added per worker, or looking at productivity rates, right? So I've hidden two lines here, but this line you see in the middle is the growth of production of the total economy, right? So value added per worker hour, right? And it's indexed to 1995. And as it grows, you see that the total economy is becoming more productive and more efficient. You then have in green here the manufacturing industry, and you see the productivity growth of manufacturing, and we see how that's even outpaced the overall economy, but we've seen large growth in productivity of manufacturing. But when you apply the same approach to construction, we find that the industry is much, much lower. And we have a very low overall construction productivity. And this is not just unique, those figures came from I think, North America in that report, but I've seen similar figures in Switzerland that tell the exact same story. And this is a global challenge. Looking at industrialization by country, we see that many, on this graph, you have the productivity overall on the y-axis and the growth in productivity. So as you go from left to right, these are countries that are accelerating their construction productivity. And those on the left of this line here are actually seeing lower productivity in their construction work, right? So you see many of the leading workers, unfortunately Switzerland's not on this graph, but we see many leaders, once leaders in the construction industry, actually seeing lower productivity in their overall industry. So the numbers also show that our industry is declining in productivity, and industrialization might offer some solutions here that we should think about. So if I would summarize this first question I asked you today, why should we industrialize construction? We have an industry characterized by poor productivity, low quality, complex production environments, and low profitability. These are all good reasons to think about industrialization, which can offer some solutions to these things. On top of that, in construction, we have some really unique challenges that we're facing that I think construction will have to answer in the next 10 to 15 years. We have a global housing crisis, so it's expected that there's a need to create, I heard, or the image that was given to me was, if you think about every building that exists in the world today, by 2050, we need to double those amount of buildings, right? And to house and shelter our growing global population. In the meantime, we have a decreasing workforce. So our skilled labor continues to decline. These craft workers that have been the backbone of construction, there's been a lack of uptake of skilled labor, and the workforce is searching for construction solutions. It's a very good time if you're a skilled construction worker to enter the market. And this is a trend that as older craftspeople retire, it's predicted will become a much, much greater problem, and it leads to low availability of labor. Finally, we have a lack of available materials, just from a sustainability and consumption approach. We do not have the materials required to continue to build the housing that we wish for the people if we continue to build in the same way. For instance, there's not enough sand for all the concrete structures that we might need to build. So we need to think about new ways to get around some of these material shortages as well. So this is my opinion on why we should industrialize construction. And the next question I'll pose to you is, can industrialized construction help? And that's what we're going to find out in this course. So we're going to see, can industrialized construction help with some of these global challenges? Yeah, so I'm still going to get to the answer to the question, what is industrialized construction? I know it's going to kind of be, it's taking a little while. But first, we should maybe introduce ourselves, the teaching team, and those of us here that are putting the course together. And then in a moment, I'm going to ask for you to share a little bit about who are you and what are your expectations for the course. So first, let me present myself. I already mentioned my name and that I'm assistant professor. I have been here at ETH for 3 years and a little bit more now. This is actually my 4th time offering the industrialized construction course. Before that, I originally came from the US, from California, and I did my PhD at Stanford University before coming here. And yeah, in addition, I had 3 years of working in the construction industry, but not in an industrialized construction capacity. This would be more in the traditional type of construction industry. We also have some other members of our teaching team that I'm going to give them a brief moment to introduce themselves. So Alex, I think if you would be so kind, if you could introduce yourself and your role in the class.
Hey everyone, I hope the sound comes through. So my name is Alex. I'm originally from Austria and I'm a trained architect. But I mean, I have practiced a few years as an architect in practices, just traditional kind of stuff. But also I got into like maker things and fab labs and this kind of stuff, and then digital fabrication later on and research and development. So that's where I spent the last 5 to 6 years, I'd say, in Australia, in Switzerland. And I've done my master's in Vienna, my bachelor's in Innsbruck. I've done a few exchange trips also. And I have to work on my motorbike soon enough. All right, so I'm not sure who's next now in the presentation slide, but I'll popcorn over to either Alina or Parham.
Okay, hi, I'm Parham. I'm originally from Iran, and I'm doing my master's currently at ETH in civil engineering. My 2 specializations are construction and maintenance management, and the other one is transportation systems. And I really like music, hiking, and photography. And I also had 4 months of experience as a startup founding member that was totally unrelated to construction in general.
Okay. But it will be very, very valuable here in the class. So Parham was in the class 2 years ago and was the TA last year. So we get to draw from a wealth of his experience as well. And Alina.
Hi everyone. My name is Alina. I originally come from Russia, where I did a bachelor in construction and mechanical engineering. Now I'm studying at the Integrated Building Systems program. My interests there are circular economy, industrialized construction. In my free time, I like to do swing dancing, and I'm active in a plastic recycling project at the Student Project House. And I as well I've been a student last year in this course, and got me very interested in the topic. And I decided even to write my master thesis on industrialized construction. And I'm happy to be in this course this year as a TA.
Okay, so next, what I always like to know is where you come from as students. Is your understanding of the topic? So what we've done is I've created a simple question in 1 word, or maybe you want to use 2 or 3 words. It doesn't matter so much. What do you think industrialized construction is all about? Maybe you've heard some things, maybe you have no idea, but I'd be happy to hear your perspective on that. All right, now I'm going to finally answer the question. What is industrialized construction? Here I think are 2 images that are a nice way of thinking about it. On the left, you have this modular construction, kind of what we call standardized offsite, volumetric, which is definitely one view of industrialized construction. On the right, we have some work here at ETH in the robotic fabrication laboratory. We're seeing offsite, bespoke timber prefabrication. These are just a couple of examples. But when I think about what is industrialized construction, I think the most common misperception is kind of people say, is it just prefabrication? And what I want you to take away from today's class is that when we speak about industrialized construction, we're speaking about more than prefabrication. So prefabrication is definitely a part of industrialized construction, but industrialized construction is really a holistic view of this kind of shift towards industrialization for the construction industry. So the means of fabrication, whether it's prefabrication or robotics, are all parts of that puzzle, but alone they are not the only answer. In fact, we find that industrialized construction is a radical reorientation of how the architecture, engineering, and construction industry works. And we're going to get to some of that kind of reorganization later in the class. But for now, it's suffice to say, here are some other parts that we view as, and that I view as core to industrialized construction. We need to reuse our experiences. We need tighter control of process. We need a new emphasis on customer and market focus. And we need to identify and create product platforms. These are all parts of industrialized construction, and we'll cover these in the course. We also see this, and some of you mentioned, digitalization or digital tools. We see the use of new advanced IT tools like product configurators. We see logistics and a much greater emphasis on long-term logistics. And also, of course, then there's this opportunity for automation that comes from it. So this is all, kind of pointing to the fact that industrialized construction is a holistic view and not just about prefabrication. You could just use prefabrication today on a single project, and that does not mean, in my opinion, that you're industrializing the construction process. We'll talk about more how it's a strategic and approach at the business model level. And one way that we'll describe kind of a view of industrialized construction is through this model here, which includes the nine areas of industrialized construction. And we'll go through these in an upcoming lecture, but there's a way of thinking about these 8 different areas like technical systems, prefabrication, long-term relations, logistics, and then think about how also there's this kind of 9th level of continuous improvement wrapping around. And I'm really happy that Dr. Jörger Lessing, who is the one that came up with this model, he'll be giving us a guest lecture in the course as well. So get to hear about his model and how it applies for his current company right now. I think we can't talk about industrialized construction without talking about also the historical view of the concept. I come from the US, so I am very aware of this kind of failure that existed in the 1960s and 70s for industrialization. And then when I have been here and talking with other international people, I've realized that it happened a lot of places. So there was an attempt called Operation Breakthrough, which this is a train pulling these modules, and they're going to be assembled on the site. Similarly, here is an article from Sweden where they had a similar failure. They called it a Million Homes project, where they tried to build 1 million homes, and they mostly succeeded in building these homes, but they were what we would call these kind of standard block buildings that were really repetitive architecture, not very interesting, and also low quality. So then over time, people didn't want to live there. These would break, or they would have many problems. And so this idea of mass production for construction and industrialization was largely viewed as a failure in the 60s and 70s. And I think, this is one of my favorite about seeing the hype and the failure. So this is a picture from the US, but this was one of the ideas of we're going to have these racks where the houses are going to sit on top of them. And then you have your little backyard on top of the rack, and maybe also you're going to be, someone will be underneath you, and you have these kind of stacked housing. And I think an interesting idea, but totally devoid of outside of thinking about what customers might actually like and what a nice architecture aesthetic might be. So, we had this kind of legacy that still exists today. I know it also exists in Switzerland, and there are some negative feelings as well about this. I do think it's important to point out, though, that not all of these attempts were failures. These are some pictures from Japan, where the idea of industrialization of construction is completely flipped around. So in Japan, the majority of houses are built in a factory using industrialized methods. And in fact, if you kind of come and say, look, we're going to build your house on site, the response would be, oh, you mean you can't afford to have your house built with the precision that a factory offers, right? Because this is the norm. This started in the 60s and 70s and has continued today, where Japan is one of the leading industrialized housing builders. And in fact, your next reading will be specifically about looking at how companies like Toyota Homes, so we know Toyota cars, but Toyota Homes and other Japanese industrialized construction companies have succeeded in the housing market there for a long time. So I do think it's important to point out that in not every context did industrialization of construction fail. In some places it did work. But today we're seeing a tremendous renewal of the concept. And I won't say too much because in the class we're going to talk about a lot of the new startups and momentum for industrialized construction. I think this slide says a lot. This is Sidewalk Labs, which is a spinoff from Google, and they've committed to creating mass timber buildings using a kit of parts that's modular and interlocking. And they're completely committed to this approach and building out factories and an ecosystem in North America. And in fact, have consulted with several Swiss timber companies and thinkers to help them develop this. And so this looks something what it looks like here. And I just grabbed from a blog post where they have this connected view from site to massing to structure to program to mechanical systems to envelope to building code all the way to factory, right? So it's this continuous design to production pipeline. And so Sidewalk Labs or Google, they've started to develop, sorry for the low resolution here, I just realized, but here's their kit of parts. So they have their bathroom pod and their shear walls and their cassettes for the commercial floors and this kind of interchangeable kit of parts for mass customization. So this is just one very small example. I just grabbed it quickly, but we are seeing a huge amount of interest and investment from within the construction industry, but also from external startups and tech companies that are very interested also in the industrialization of construction. And in addition to that, we're seeing the rise of robotics in construction. And I'm really happy that Alex will be joining us to bring a lot of his expertise about entrepreneurship for robotics to the class. And I would loosely categorize robotics as we're seeing kind of a lot around offsite and prefabricated, or MMC, which stands for Modern Methods of Construction, as they call this movement in the UK. But we're also seeing kind of small project layout robots. Here's a company called Canvas, which has just deployed a drywall robot, which can effectively do the job of drywall, one of the most common building materials in North America. We're seeing a lot of funding for 3D printing startups, and then also some wearables and things like this. So we're seeing this kind of connection with robotics becoming more and more important in the construction industry. Yeah, and then what you're going to see in this class is we're going to have some introductions to some theoretical models for industrialized construction. So I already mentioned this wheel. You'll probably also see it in the guest lecture if you look closely today. This is, in my opinion, a very simple but most holistic and complete model for understanding and thinking about industrialized construction companies. We'll talk about mass customization and configuration engineering later in the course. And we'll also talk about how to set up a product and process platform and the relationship between products and projects. These are all things you probably have not thought about very much. You kind of think, I'm just an architect, I'm just a structural engineer, I'm just going to do my calculations or my design. But in this class, I want to challenge you to really rethink the approach that goes into that. All right, so if I would summarize what this course is all about, it's about theoretical models for industrialized construction, where we can understand building systems and product strategies and move away from the project as a prototype and start to think about the building as a product. Through that, we talk about tech that enables configuration platforms and mass customization. We'll look at some case studies, a lot of case studies of industry implementations. And a big emphasis on this course is to think about entrepreneurship in architecture, engineering, and construction. And after the break, we'll talk about the course project. You probably saw some of the previews, but part of your job is to propose a new company for industrialized construction. That's a big part of this class. And we're going to walk you through how to do that. So some of the guest lectures this year, I'm really excited because when I first came, I think partly because I was new here and coming from the US, and partly because there wasn't a lot of momentum happening in Switzerland. So we had a lot of external international speakers. But this year we're going to have more than half of our guest lectures from Swiss companies or Swiss entrepreneurs working in industrialized construction, including some very new startups. So it'll be exciting to hear how this is not something that's happening in the international space only, but something that's, I think, quietly growing here in Switzerland as a chance for new startups and new initiatives. So this is just a list of some of the companies that will be speaking to us, and they represent a lot of different areas. So all the way from what I would consider like a classic industrialized construction company like Swiss Property, to Aeternum, which is a startup, to Leonard, which is a venture capital an accelerator spinoff that's looking to accelerate investments in industrialized construction, to Guido, who's doing a lot on the manufacturing side itself. So, and then Mavit is doing some great things with 3D printing in Switzerland of concrete. So we'll have a great spectrum of a lot of different perspectives, and we've tried mostly to link the course lectures with the guest lecture so that the content is relatively similar to what we talk about in the lecture. So we have a nice follow-up in the guest lecture. Oh, I had one more, and Bokluk as well. A joint venture between Skanska and IKEA from Sweden. So we'll have a nice lecture there. Something sadly I have to share, we really love our tour of Erne Holzbau. This was 2 years ago. I was hoping maybe we'd be able to have it in May. It's not looking likely, but if it does happen, we'll make it optional, and we'll try to have probably a Friday tour of Erne Holzbau near Basel, where we could see an industrialized construction factory and how they're approaching, how they set up their factory, how they're dealing with digitalization, how their factory looks. So. Hopefully this is a brief introduction, and I'm looking forward to jumping into the details in the next semester. All right, so let's talk about the course project, and then in about 15 minutes, we're going to have our guest lecture from Kit Switch. So what is the big goal of this class? What's the big project all about? Your project in this class is to propose a new company, a new industrialized construction company. And this might feel like quite a big challenge. And we're going to break it down for you step by step. You saw probably the example pitches from last year's class where we recorded those. So you get an idea of what we're looking for. But I find that there's kind of two types of classes. There are classes where you need to gain fundamental knowledge, your core design or engineering classes. And then there are classes where you need to apply that knowledge. And this class is definitely the second one. So we are not going to teach you a lot of new fundamental engineering, structural equations, finite element analysis. That's not what this class is. What we're doing is we're trying to take this collective knowledge from multiple different disciplines, put them together, and ask you and challenge you to propose a new company as part of the course project. Along the way, we're going to give you tips. We're going to give you kind of the latest trends. We're going to give you guidance on what it means to propose a startup, what it means to be an entrepreneur in AEC. We're going to have structured lab sessions in hour 3 where we give you prompts and get you started. But that's the big idea of this class. And I will say, right off the bat, if that is not something that's appealing to you, if you think this kind of teamwork and ambiguous setting of proposing a new company is not very attractive or not something you want to do, this is probably not the class for you. I just want to be very clear about that. We're not going to give you an exam at the end of this class. It's about proposing putting your ideas to work. And this is all a part of this broader critical thinking initiative and what we call project-based learning. So the critical thinking initiative at ETH is really about applying knowledge in critical assessment and thinking outside of the box. And we use project-based learning as a, learning through a specific project. And project-based learning is problem-oriented. So we're going to give you a problem, which is to start a new company, but you have to think even more about what is the problem that your company is going to solve. It's interdisciplinary. So we're taking experts from multiple backgrounds. We're putting you together and having you work together. And it teaches through examples. You'll notice a lot of case studies. I'm not going to tell you exactly what the right answer is. I'm going to give you a lot of examples that you can learn from and draw from as part of the course. And finally, it's participant directed. I feel very strongly that you should decide what you want your company to be, this kind of project company, and you should determine where you'll go. And finally, it should involve team or group work, right? So you should be working together towards this to solve this problem. So this is the idea behind project-based learning. And the reason why we're talking about entrepreneurship, and this is a slide from one of our white papers we wrote recently, is there has been an incredible momentum and increase in funding from either financial institutions or venture capital in industrialized construction companies. There is a view that the construction market, because of the reasons we talked about earlier, lack of industrialization and lack of productivity growth, that this could be a market that could be seeing disruption. And so therefore, there's been an enormous amount of investment. This was figures from North America, but we found that across Europe, there's also a lot of momentum and a lot of funding going into new companies. So what better way to learn about this new kind of ecosystem of the construction industry than you yourself proposing your own new idea? Here are some examples we have of some of the logos from previous companies from different classes. This is from 2 years ago. Last year, you saw all the videos in the pre-material. And Parham was a part of the Zen company. So I'm going to turn it over to him to give a very short example and overview of how they structured their Zen project, which was a very successful project 2 years ago. So Parham, if you would like, you could go ahead and have the floor and say a little bit about Zen and how you propose this.
Okay, sure thing. Our team was tasked with building a configurator. So what a configurator is basically an online platform in which people can configure their own house in a way. And we kind of came up with a solution or a minimum viable product as a start, that we start with a one-story single-family house. And the rough idea was that the internal composition of the house, the interior, could be configured by the customer before building the building. And customers could also change or modify the interior of the house even after construction. So in order to make that possible, we had to make a library of modules, because the way we thought about making that possible was to come up with a system of modules that could be embedded into the house and could be changed quite easily. And the house also came with wooden structural frames that could not be changed, unlike the modules. And on the next slide, we also had a brief overview of our UI and how the customers could do that. And the customers could basically choose their own configuration to their own liking. And the way that we achieved the marriage of all of these modules and the framework was through a kit of parts solution. And of course, this being the industrialized construction course, this was not only about the technicalities and engineering, it was also about the business models, as you can see in the next slide. And it was also about the market positioning and how we saw ourselves in comparison to the incumbents in the specific sector that we aimed our product at, and what we had to offer. And we had to kind of tailor our product to the specific needs of the customer within that particular market that we were aiming. And we came up with a rudimentary business model and revenue models in order to fund the startup and how we use the funds in order to go forward. So this was not merely a project about how we could come up with modules and how we can make that usable through a user interface, but it was also about how we can make this work and actually implement it. Yeah, this was basically a really rough overview of what we did 2 years ago.
Thanks, Param. And just to follow up, what would you say was your experience in, kind of taking the class and proposing the project? What did you enjoy and what was the most challenging parts of this?
I think the most challenging part about the course was that I was opted for a role that was not particularly into, and I really didn't have much expertise. I was the architect, the one responsible for designing stuff, but my engineering background has was mostly about structural engineering. So I had to put myself in someone else's shoes, but that came with a lot of valuable lessons. And I also learned that I had an interest in business models and how to come up with ideas and how you fund them and how you go forward. And that kind of enabled me to get out of my comfort zone and just pursue, other concepts besides engineering, such as business and entrepreneurship. So this course was kind of an eye-opening experience for me.
Awesome. And Alina, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but you took the class last year. Maybe you could just say a little bit about what you found to be challenging and also what you learned from the course project.
Yes, so I would say the challenges were teamwork and this is exciting and challenging at the same time. So everyone has their own ideas and we have to kind of navigate our way to try to satisfy everyone's wishes and everyone's ideas about it. So there was a lot of compromises and a lot of describing why you prefer this over that. That was the difficult part, but as well that gave me an ability to learn some of the leadership and trying to put a project together with 3 other students from another program than me. So they had another background and another views. And I would say at first I was somehow skeptical of industrialized construction because my personal interests are more in the sustainability side and circular economy. But then I saw this real opportunity and I got very excited about it. And I feel like it is the future. And this course really showed me this opportunity.
Wow, that's very, very kind of you. I didn't mean for such a nice praise, but I promise I didn't tell her to say that. Maybe just a short view to Alex. If Alex, you could maybe say something about how you see entrepreneurship in AEC and what you see as this growing momentum for both robotics and kind of all entrepreneurship in our field.
So depending on how much time I have to answer that one.
About 1 minute, yeah.
Perfect. So, I mean, look, so today AEC is not only about, it's of course delivering a building, but you can also think of building the pipeline behind so you can monetize software and people understand this. So actually it's crazy that Google or this kind of software companies are actually going into construction because we can't fix it internally somehow, right? So they see it like a low-hanging fruit and they jump onto this. So entrepreneurship is basically around value creation, value extraction of, let's say, technologies or inventions. And people get interested. I think it's a very good time. So my PhD topic is actually on exactly this. And I think you can see what also Daniel was showing before. It's like a lot of investments, big startups, the new superstars are being built, and maybe construction, we don't know, but we're part of it. Maybe in 10 years from now, it's going to be a similar landscape to what technology is, where we have like Facebook, Apple, Amazon. Maybe there will be some, monopoly in construction as well. It's probably not that likely that quickly, but that's one trend we could, for example, see. I hope for more local and smaller solutions, but yeah, we have to be open for all of them.